Hello everyone. Today I'm presenting my research on how social media, specifically a behavior called doom scrolling, is contributing to a mental health crisis among teenagers. My name is Daniel Estrada, and this presentation is for my class ENC 1102 with my professor, Miss Witherington. Before I get into the evidence, I want to ask a question. How many of you have picked up your phone in the last hour and just scrolled through something? Chances are most of us did, and by the end of this presentation you'll understand exactly why that happens and what it may be costing us. Let's start with a clear definition. Doom scrolling is the compulsive habit of endlessly consuming negative or distressing content online. The term went viral during the pandemic, but the behavior was already well established before that. Here's the key psychological concept. Our brains have something called a negativity bias. It's a survival mechanism. Our ancestors who were alert to threats survived longer than those who weren't. Today, that same hardwiring makes us stop and stare at bad news, disaster coverage, and distressing content online. Social media platforms know this and engineer their systems to keep feeding us that content. The numbers on the right side of this slide tell part of the story. Americans average over 7 hours of daily screen time. Teen depression has risen 52% since 2005, and in 2012, the year Instagram exploded in popularity, marks the turning point in almost every mental health dataset for teenagers. This is not a coincidence. One line from the slide I want to emphasize out loud. This is not a personal weakness, it is by design. That idea is central to everything I'll argue today. This is the core argument of my entire research project. Let me read it out loud and break it down. Social media platforms deliberately engineer features and include infinite scroll, push notifications, and algorithmic feeds that exploit psychological vulnerabilities in teenagers, directly contributing to a documented crisis in adolescent mental health that demands both individual digital literacy and urgent platform regulation. Now, allow me to break down the claims. First, the design is intentional. This is not an accident or a side effect. Engineers built infinite scroll, push notifications, and algorithmic feeds specifically to maximize time on the screen. You'll see evidence for this in the next few slides. Second, it causes documented harm. We have CDC data, APA research, and peer-reviewed studies all showing a direct link between heavy social media use and rising rates of anxiety, depression, and poor sleep in teenagers. Now, for my third point, action is required. Individual willpower is not enough when systems we are up against are this powerful. We need digital literacy education and platform level regulation. Everything in this presentation builds towards and supports this three-part argument. Let's look at the data. The bar chart on the left shows the percentage of female high school students who reported persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness, measured by the CDC's Youth Risk Behavior Survey every 2 years since 2009. Notice the pattern. The numbers climbed steadily starting around 2013, shortly after smartphone adoption, and social media use skyrocketed among teenagers by 2021. The number peaked at 42%. This is a CDC government verified, nationally representative, tracked millions of teenagers across the country. John Twiggs' research, published in Atlantic 2017, adds another alarming finding. Teenagers who spend 5 or more hours per day on their devices are 66% more likely to have a risk factor for suicide compared to those who use phones for 1 hour or less per day. I want to be clear about what I'm claiming here. This is a correlation. There's no proven causation, but the timing, the scale, and the consistency across multiple independent datasets make the link compelling enough to take it seriously. That is exactly what the CDC, the AEPA researchers like Tweg are doing. Now, the question becomes, what exactly is driving this decline? This slide addresses the most important part of my argument and thesis. These harmful outcomes are not accidents. They are a result of deliberate engineering decisions. My primary source here is The Social Dilemma, a Netflix documentary featuring the actual engineers and designers who built the features we use every day. Two people stand out. Oscar Raskin invented the infinite scroll feature that removes any natural endpoint from your feed. He came forward publicly to say that he regrets building it, estimate that it costs billions of hours of unintended use every day worldwide. Tristan Harris, a former designer ethicist at Google, coined the term persuasive technology to describe how every element of these apps, the likes, notifications, and feeds, is calibrated to trigger a dopamine response and override self-control. Looking at the four cards that I have here, infinite scroll removes stopping points, algorithmic feeds promote emotionally provocative content, push notifications fragment our attention up to 80 times a day, and the like system creates a social validation loop that is especially dangerous during the identity forming years of teenagers. These four work together as a system. Each one is powerful on its own combined. Combined, they create what psychologists describe as a behavioral trap, and it is a trap that is especially effective on teenagers whose prefrontal cortex and brain's decision-making center is still developing. This is why telling teens just to put the phone down is an insufficient response. Now let's connect platform design to the documented psychological outcomes. The research identifies four major categories of harm. First is anxiety and depression. The APA's synthesis of peer-reviewed studies is very clear on one point. Passive scrolling, just consuming content without interacting, is more harmful than active social media use, like messaging or posting. This matters because doom scrolling is by definition passive. Social comparison, measuring yourself against the highlighted reels of others, is identified as a key driver of anxiety and lowered self-esteem, particularly in adolescent girls. Second, sleep distribution. Screens emit blue light that suppress melatonin, the hormone that regulates sleep. Beyond the light itself, the emotional stimulation from distressing content makes it harder for the brain to wind down. Research shows teens who use phones in bed average 1 to 2 fewer hours of sleep per night. Third, attention fragmentation. Every notification, every scroll, every tab switch trains the brain to expect constant stimulation. For teenagers trying to read, study, or sustain any focused effort, this has real, measurable academic consequences. Fourth, cyberbullying. The APA reports that teenagers who experience harassment online are significantly more likely to develop clinical depression and suicidal ideation. What matters most is that these efforts and effects are cumulative. One disrupt of night sleep won't harm a teenager, but years of disrupted sleep, social comparison, attention damage, and potential harassment compound into the crisis we are seeing according to the data. My thesis argues that the crisis demands action. So let's talk about what the evidence actually shows. I've organized these solutions into three levels. At the individual level, the most effective strategies based on the NYT article are structural rather than willpower based. Removing notifications so you don't get pulled back in, setting hard daily time limits, and keeping your phone out of your bedroom work not because they require discipline, but because they change your environment so you can't scroll without what's something in front of you. At the school and family level, digital literacy education has shown real promise. Studies have found that when teenagers understand how these platforms work, it's designed to manipulate the algorithms and dopamine loops and variable reward systems so that they become more conscious and critical users. That awareness itself is productive. At the policy and platform level, the U.S. Surgeon General issued a formal advisory in 2023 calling for a federal regulation of social media platforms as they relate to minors. The APA has recommended mandatory platform safety audits. The argument mirrors that we already have with cigarettes and alcohol. We regulate products that cause documented harm to young people. The evidence for social media harm is now just as strong. I want to be clear. I'm not arguing we should ban social media. I'm arguing that the current, largely unregulated version is not safe for teenagers, and that meaningful change requires action at all three levels simultaneously. Let me bring everything together. We started with a question. Why do we keep scrolling even when it makes us feel worse? The answer is that we are up against a system that is engineered by some of the most talented engineers in the world, backed by millions of dollars, and specifically designed to keep us scrolling. The three research questions I said to answer have now been addressed. We know how excessive social media use harms teens' mental health through anxiety, depression, sleep loss, and attention damage. We know which design features drive this use compulse: infinite scrolling, algorithms, notifications, and social validation. We know what interventions work: the individual, school, family, and policy levels. And my thesis stands. The crisis is documented. The design is intentional, and the action required is at every level. I'll leave you with this. Social media, don't let it use you. The shift from passive consumer to conscientious user is where individual change begins, but it cannot stop there. The system needs to change. I'd like to thank you for watching my presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much. Here's my works cited page. I would also give thanks to my professor, Miss Witherington, for allowing me to do this research project. Thank you very much, and adieu.